I was born on an island that only really had one rule. The kind that wasn't spoken but lived in people's posture. The way their mouths tightened. The way their eyes avoided a certain part of the sea. We were never to talk about the island across the water. It sat to the east, a half-mile off our shoreline. You couldn't miss it. You'd see it from almost anywhere on our side. Past the docks, over the tree line, from the cliffs on the northern edge where the goats grazed. It was always there, sitting still, never changing. A piece of land so close you could row to it in under an hour, though no one did. I can't remember a single adult ever naming it. Not even once. And if you said something about it, even by accident, someone would shut it down immediately. Not angrily, just firmly, like flicking a candle out. One time when I was little, maybe 7 or 8, I pointed across the water and asked my mother if anyone lived there. She didn't scold me. She didn't say anything at all. She just took my hand and led me inside, like I'd asked where babies come from or what happens when you die. That kind of silence. Her grip was tight enough to leave marks on my wrist, small white crescents that faded by dinner time. I never asked again. Another time, I asked my grandfather if he'd ever been. He was cleaning fish out by the shed, his knife moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done it 10,000 times before. He paused just a second too long before saying, "No." The blade stayed suspended above the fish's belly, dripping. Then he added, "Never ask about it again." And that was that. He finished gutting the fish in silence, and I stood there watching the scales catch the light like tiny mirrors, feeling like I'd opened a door I shouldn't have seen. It wasn't forbidden in the way dangerous things are forbidden. It was deeper, like the island didn't want to be spoken of, and the people here had agreed to let it be. Our island wasn't big. You could walk across it in a few hours if you didn't stop. There was the village near the western bay, with its stone paths and wood-slatted houses, and the small church where we held market on Sundays. The church bell rang at dawn and dusk, a sound so constant you only noticed it when it stopped. A few scattered farms dotted the hillsides, their fields divided by stone walls that had stood for generations. The fishing docks stretched out into the bay like a crooked finger, weathered gray from decades of salt spray and storms. And then there was the old watchtower from before my time that no one used anymore, its windows long since boarded up, its purpose forgotten or deliberately ignored. It was quiet, steady, the kind of place where every door creaked the same way, and you knew who'd passed by just from the sound of their cough. Mrs. Brennan's rasp, old Thomas's wheeze, the postmaster's deliberate clearing of his throat before speaking. We knew each other's rhythms like we knew the tides. The trade boat came once a week, usually just before noon. We never saw where it came from. It always arrived from the mist, materializing like something summoned rather than sailed. The trader was a silent man with weathered hands and eyes that never quite focused on anyone's face. He brought flour, salt, oil, iron tools, letters sometimes, though no one in my family ever got any. It left with barrels of fish and boxes of preserved vegetables, goods we'd spent the week preparing. No one ever left with it. Only the trader ever boarded it. He'd pass down the rope to whoever helped him load and unload, but no one else ever crossed the rail. Once, when I was 12, I asked my father why no one ever left. He looked at me for a long time, his face unreadable, before saying simply, "Where would they go?" As if the question itself was absurd. As if our island was the only place that existed in any meaningful way. We were a closed loop. We grew up knowing our boundaries. The sea, the woods, the cliffs. And beyond all of that, the other island. Always watching. Always ignored. There were 5 of us who couldn't leave it alone. Me, Jonah, Sam, Eli, and Nathan. We were kids like any others. Too much energy, not enough fear. We ran barefoot through the brush, built slingshots from driftwood, dared each other to knock on the widow's door and run before she answered. We spent hot days pretending to be soldiers and cold nights pretending we weren't scared of ghosts. We stole things, but nothing important. Apples from Mr. Garrett's orchard, candles from the church supply room, once a bottle of wine we didn't even like and ended up pouring into the dirt behind the smokehouse. We were just loud, restless boys, pushing against the edges of a world that felt too small. Jonah was the biggest, tall for his age, shoulders already starting to widen like his father's. He didn't talk much, but when he did, people listened. There was a gravity to him, even then. Sam was the quickest, always first to climb something, first to run, first to joke about things that made the rest of us squirm. He had a laugh that carried, bright and sharp, the kind you could hear from 3 houses away. Eli was quiet and careful, always the one who asked, "What if?" before we did something dumb. He thought 3 steps ahead, while the rest of us were still on step 1. Nathan was clever, sometimes too clever. He'd make up lies so good we believed them even after he admitted they weren't true. He could spin a story about finding a dead bird and turn it into a tale of witchcraft and curses that would keep us awake for nights. And then there was me. I don't know what I was in that group. I guess I was the one who remembered, the one who carried it longest, the one who still sees her face when I close my eyes at night, even now, decades later. We never said it out loud, but we all watched the island. From the rocks by the southern cliff, where the waves crashed hardest and spray would soak us to the skin. From the upper fields when the wind cleared the trees and you could see the whole coastline laid out like a map. From the shore, when we were supposed to be fishing but spent more time staring at the horizon than watching our lines. We'd talk about it only when we were sure no one else was listening. "Maybe it's a ruin," Eli once said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Like, people used to live there, but something happened." Sam snorted. "What, like ghosts?" But his dismissal sounded forced, like he didn't quite believe his own skepticism. "Maybe it's where the traitor comes from," I offered. "He never says." Jonah said nothing, just stared into the distance, his jaw set, his eyes fixed on that dark mass of land that mirrored our own. We didn't speak of it often, and when we did, it was always with that half-serious tone kids use when they're testing how far they can push something without making it real. Like if we kept it light, kept it theoretical, we could peek at the edges of the forbidden without consequence. But over time, the idea started to settle. Not in our mouths, but in our bones. Like it had been waiting there all along, patient, knowing we'd eventually stop resisting. We didn't plan it then, but I think we all knew we would. It was Jonah who said it first. We were behind the storehouse, the 5 of us perched on a broken cart that sank slightly in the middle, chewing through whatever scraps we'd stolen from our kitchens. Salted fish that dried your mouth out, hard bread that took forever to soften, half-rotted apples that still had enough sweetness left in them to be worth the trouble. The kind of food that tasted better because it wasn't given to us, because we'd taken it. He didn't clear his throat or build up to it. He just said, "I think we should go," like he was talking to himself, like the words had been sitting in his mouth for so long they'd finally forced their way out. No one asked where. We all knew. That silence, the way no one looked at each other, the way we kept chewing like the words hadn't landed, that was agreement. That was the moment we stopped being curious and became committed. Sam spat a seed into the dirt. Tomorrow. Jonah still didn't look up. His eyes were fixed on something in the distance we couldn't see. 2 mornings. Before sunup. Nathan nodded slowly, like he was calculating something in his head, weighing risks, measuring consequences. Eli wiped his hands on his pants, leaving damp streaks on the fabric. His hands were shaking, just slightly. Just enough to notice if you were looking. I didn't say anything, but I was already picturing the tide, already planning what I'd tell my parents, already wondering if I'd come back. We met 2 mornings later, just before sunrise, in the kind of pale, still light that feels like the world hasn't started yet. The moon was still visible, hanging low in the sky like it hadn't made up its mind to leave. Everything looked drained of color, grays and blues, and that peculiar pre-dawn purple that makes familiar things look strange. The dirt was damp from night air, and everything around us smelled like the ocean. Not fresh like wind and salt, stale like old ropes and barnacles, and the inside of a bait barrel left in the sun too long. We didn't bring much. A couple flasks of water that sloshed when we walked. A loaf of bread wrapped in a cloth that was already going stale. Some rope that none of us really knew how to use properly. A pocket knife none of us could use right. The blade was dull, the handle loose. Eli brought his father's compass, a brass thing with a scratched face and a bent needle. The face was cracked, and the needle had a habit of drifting even when you held it steady, But he brought it anyway, clutching it like a talisman. Sam brought a hammer, for some reason, though he never said why. I think he just wanted to feel like he had a weapon. Jonah had taken the skiff from the far end of the dock where the unused boats were kept, half sunk and forgotten by everyone except the kids who knew where to look. It wasn't in good shape. Paint peeling, one bench cracked down the middle, water stains on the boards, but it floated. That was enough. It creaked when we pushed it into the shallows, and for a second I thought the sound might carry and wake someone. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought the others could hear it. But the village above us stayed dark. No lights flickered on. No footsteps came running. Just the soft hiss of water and the thump of oars against the side of the hull. We climbed in one by one, the boat rocking with each addition. Jonah and Nathan took the oars first, setting a rhythm without speaking. The rest of us sat in silence, our backs to the shore. I didn't look back. I was afraid if I did, I'd lose my nerve. That I'd see my mother's window and imagine her face pressed against the glass, watching me row toward whatever waded across that dark water. The water was colder than I expected. Not freezing, but deep cold, like it came from underneath something. From some place that never saw light. There wasn't much wind, just a faint breeze that moved in slow, irregular pulses. It brushed the surface of the sea in places, creating patterns that looked almost deliberate. Almost like writing. I watched the light from the sky ripple and disappear beneath the oars as we moved, hypnotic and unsettling in equal measure. As we got farther out, the shape of the island came into view, slowly, like it was pushing through fog we hadn't noticed before. I'd seen it all my life, but only from shore. Now, from the water, it felt different. Bigger, heavier, more real. The trees formed a jagged silhouette against the sky, and the hills behind them looked like sleeping animals just starting to stir. The coastline was identical to ours, the same curve of the bay, the same cliff formations, the same placement of trees along the shore. The closer we got, the more it felt familiar. The shape of the coastline, the slope of the land. It was like rowing toward a memory, one you couldn't fully place until you were inside it. Like returning to a house you'd lived in as a child, finding all the rooms exactly where you remembered, but somehow wrong in ways you couldn't articulate. There was a moment, maybe halfway across, where I turned to look behind us and saw that our own island was already fading into mist. A low fog was moving in fast, curling over the water like smoke through grass. The beach, the houses, even the trees gone. Just a soft, gray smear behind us. It looked farther away than it should have been. Much farther, like we'd been rowing for hours instead of minutes. "Fins," Sam said, and he said it too calmly, like he was trying not to cause a stir, like he was announcing the weather. We all looked. Just to the right of the boat, something slid under the surface. Long, smooth, dark gray against darker water. It passed without sound, without disturbing the surface beyond a slight ripple. Then another, and another. 4, maybe 5. Just below the waterline, circling in wide, slow arcs. I couldn't see their shapes fully, but they moved like they had purpose, like they were escorting us, or hurting us. "Sharks," Jonah said under his breath. "Blacktips, I think." Eli leaned forward, gripping the side of the boat until his knuckles went white. "How can you tell?" Jonah didn't answer. He just started rowing faster. So did Nathan. Neither of them said a word, but the skiff began to lurch forward harder with each pull. The oars splashed louder. Water sloshed over the sides. Sam reached down for the hammer in his bag and gripped it like it would make a difference against something with that many teeth. The boat started to wobble with the force of the strokes. Water splashed up, cold and sharp, soaking our legs. The nose tilted dangerously with each pull. I tried to stay calm, tried to keep my breathing steady, but the air around me had gone thin, and every muscle in my body was bracing for something I couldn't see. For jaws closing around wood. For the water rushing in. For that terrible moment of knowing it was too late. The island was close now. Close enough to see the rock line clearly. No dock. No paths. No signs of habitation. Just broken shoreline and thick brush that came almost down to the water. A crooked tree leaned out over the water near a narrow stretch of beach, barely wide enough to stand on. It looked untouched, uninviting, wrong in a way I couldn't name. Then came the hit, a soft thud, followed by a jolt that rocked the skiff, like we'd slammed into something just below the surface. Something solid and unforgiving. "Reef," Jonah barked, his voice cracking with the effort of rowing. The boat tilted violently to one side, then the other. Water surged in through a crack below the center bench. Cold, fast, rising around our ankles, and then our calves. The boat was taking on water faster than physics should have allowed. Something heavy clattered against the boards, maybe the hammer. A second later, one of the bags split open and spilled across the bench. Bread floating, rope uncoiling, the knife sliding toward the low side and disappearing into the rising water. "Out!" someone yelled. I think it was Nathan, but I'm not sure. My ears were ringing with panic. We didn't argue. We moved. The skiff was already sinking under us, one side dipping hard. I kicked off the bench and dove, not even sure if I was jumping or falling. Water swallowed me to the neck. The cold hit like a punch to the chest, forcing the air from my lungs. My breath locked up, and for a second I couldn't remember how to move my arms. Behind me, splashing, gasping, limbs crashing into water. I could hear it all, but didn't look back. Couldn't look back. Every second mattered. The current fought harder than I expected. My arms were sluggish, my legs heavier than they should have been. I kicked toward shore, every breath shallow and burning. Something brushed past my foot, too fast to register, too soft to be a log, too deliberate to be debris. I didn't stop. I kicked harder, thrashing through the water like I could outrun whatever was beneath me. The distance couldn't have been more than 30 yards, but it felt like swimming through glass. Like the water itself was trying to hold me back. The kind that keeps pulling you down instead of letting you break through. When my fingers finally hit rock, I hauled myself forward so fast I scraped both elbows raw. Skin tore. Blood mixed with seawater. I didn't care. I just wanted to be out. Wanted solid ground under me. Wanted to stop feeling like prey. One by one, the others crashed onto the beach behind me. Crawling. Dragging themselves across wet stone. Coughing up seawater that burned their throats. The skiff was already gone. Either swallowed by the reef or drifting, half-flooded, back into the mist. We'd never see it again. None of us had our bags. No compass. No food. No knife. The hammer was probably at the bottom of the sea by now. Everything we'd packed was gone. We had nothing but the clothes on our backs and whatever was in our pockets, which amounted to nothing useful. We stood there, shivering, dripping, catching our breath. One by one, we looked at each other, counting. 5 of us. No one missing. No one hurt, at least not badly. Just scraped and soaked and scared in a way we'd never admit to each other. Then we looked around. It took a few seconds before anyone spoke. "This is the same place," Sam said, slower this time. His voice had lost its usual brightness. "It's the same beach." It almost looked like it. Same crooked tree leaning out over the water like it was eavesdropping on the sea. Same cluster of black rocks jutting up along the curve of the cove. The same soft slope leading into the tree line beyond. Even the shape of the shoreline felt familiar, like we'd looped through time instead of space. Like we'd rowed in a circle and ended up exactly where we started. Jonah turned in a full circle, scanning the trees and the shore and then the water again. "We didn't go anywhere," he said. His voice didn't sound angry. It sounded resigned. Defeated. Eli was squinting at the ocean, his face tight with confusion and fear. We rowed across. We saw the island. We left. He didn't say it like he was arguing. He said it like he was trying to remind himself. Like he needed to hear the words out loud to believe them. No one responded. What could we say? We started walking, slow at first, still trying to make sense of it. The beach looked nearly identical to our own, but it wasn't. The rocks were a little too sharp, their edges catching light in ways that seemed wrong. The slope rose at a slightly different angle. The tree line was thinner, the color of the grass not quite right, more yellow than green, more brown than should be natural this time of year. Close enough to confuse us, different enough to keep us on edge. Like looking at your reflection and noticing the eyes aren't quite in the right place. There was a narrow path leading off the beach and into the woods, just wide enough for two of us to walk side by side. Packed dirt, worn smooth, clearly used regularly. None of us remembered it being there before. The air was different as we climbed, heavy and warm, like the weather had changed without warning. Like we'd walked into summer despite leaving on a spring morning. The trees swayed gently in a breeze we couldn't feel on our skin, and the grass up on the slope moved just a little too much. Just enough to notice. Just enough to make you wonder what was moving it. Jonah took the lead, Sam just behind him. Then Nathan, Eli, and me bringing up the rear, constantly looking over my shoulder like something might be following us. We'd only made it about 30 or 40 paces up the trail when Nathan came to a stop. At first, I thought he was just catching his breath. His shoulders were heaving, water still dripping from his hair. But then I noticed where he was looking, up the slope, toward the tall grass hugging the hillside. His body had gone completely rigid. I followed his gaze and froze. She was so close. A very tall woman. She wasn't walking, wasn't moving at all, just standing in the grass like she'd been waiting for us to see her. Like she'd been there all along, patient, knowing we'd eventually notice. No one spoke. No one moved. Even the wind kept going like she wasn't part of the world. The grass around her swayed. Her dress, a long, pale thing that might have been white once, clung damply to her legs. But she didn't shift, didn't breathe, didn't blink. Her arms hung straight at her sides, too straight, too heavy, like she didn't know how they were supposed to work. Like someone had described arms to her, but she'd never actually seen them used. She stood maybe 10 yards uphill, close enough to see the wrongness in how she carried herself. Her posture looked almost human, like a figure drawn from memory by someone who'd never actually seen one. All the parts were there, but the proportions were off by fractions that your brain couldn't quite process. That's when I realized what had hooked in my brain. Everything around her moved, but she didn't. Not even a twitch. Not even the automatic micro-movements that make a person look alive. She was perfectly, impossibly still. Do you see her? Eli's voice was low, tight. Like he wasn't sure if he was talking to us or himself. Like he thought maybe he was the only one seeing this. Of course we saw her. None of us had looked away. We couldn't. It felt like blinking might break some invisible barrier and make her come closer. Then she smiled. I didn't understand why it made my stomach twist at first. It wasn't exaggerated. It wasn't monstrous. It wasn't the kind of smile you see in horror stories. Too wide, too many teeth. It was subtle, just wrong. Her mouth stretched into what should have been a smile, but the shape was off. The corners bent down instead of up, like someone had tried to mimic it from memory and gotten the geometry wrong. Like she'd been told what a smile was, but had never seen one. The expression looked carved into her face, held there by will rather than emotion. But the rest of her face, the parts that move when you smile, those were perfect. The cheeks lifted exactly right. The skin around her eyes crinkled in all the correct places. Her eyes themselves actually seemed to brighten. That mismatch was worse than anything else. It was the uncanny valley personified. It was wrong in a way that bypassed conscious thought and went straight to primal fear. Her eyes were kind, genuinely kind. Not cold, not distant. She looked at us the way a mother looks at her children when they've been gone too long and she's missed them desperately. There was warmth in her expression, real warmth, and it made my skin crawl in a way I still can't explain. It made me want to run more than anything threatening ever could. I can tell you this. If I'd known then what I know now about that woman, I would have turned and swum back out into the water. I would have taken my chances with the sharks. Gladly. She raised her arm. The motion was slow, unnatural, like her joints didn't belong to her. Like she was a puppet being operated by someone who'd forgotten how people move. Her hand lifted until one long, stiff finger pointed straight at us. The finger didn't bend. It just extended, rigid and accusatory and impossibly steady. We didn't scream. We didn't run. We just started backing away, careful not to turn around, like we thought not facing her would make things worse. Like predators, she might chase if we ran. Sam bumped into Jonah, who muttered a curse under his breath. "Why is she pointing at us?" Sam asked, barely audible. His voice sounded younger than it had that morning. Nobody answered. What could we say? I kept watching her finger. Something felt off about it. The angle. It wasn't quite right. The trajectory didn't match where we stood. Eli squinted, stepping half a pace forward despite everything in his body, probably screaming not to. Wait, he murmured. I don't think she's pointing at us. I looked from her finger to her face, following the line of her arm. He was right. Her eyes weren't on us. They were aimed just above our heads, focused on something behind us. Her arm cut across the air in a straight line, not to us, but over us. Past us. That's when I felt it, that slow pull in my gut. The primal feeling that something was behind me. The lizard-brain certainty that you're being watched. We turned, all at once, unable to help ourselves, and saw 5 people standing in the woods behind us, just beyond the path, half shaded by the trees. Not hidden, not lurking, just waiting, standing perfectly still, watching us with expressions that held nothing at all. They looked like us. Same height, same hair, same builds. They even wore clothes similar to ours, wet from the water, clinging to their frames. But they were wrong in ways you didn't notice at first. The clothes were mirrored, buttons on the wrong side, shoelaces tied in configurations that didn't make sense, pockets where pockets shouldn't be. Nathan's double had a tear in his shirt, but on the opposite side. Eli's double stood with arms crossed like he always did when nervous, except the arms were reversed. Left where the right should be, right where the left belonged. They weren't moving, just standing there, perfectly spaced, perfectly aligned, like mannequins arranged in a storefront, like they were waiting for us to do something, to say something, to acknowledge them. We didn't speak. They didn't either, just stared, expressionless, blank, empty, like dolls with nothing behind the eyes. I stepped back without meaning to. The crunch of leaves underfoot sounded deafening in the silence, like I'd announced our position to everything in the forest. The air had changed. Not colder, not darker, just wrong. Like the rules we trusted had quietly stopped applying. Like we'd crossed some invisible threshold and the universe no longer worked the way it should. I glanced back at the woman. She was still there, no longer pointing. Her body hadn't moved an inch, but her head was pushing forward. Just her head, tilting, straining toward us like it was being reeled in by an invisible line. Her neck stretched too far, vertebrae visible under skin that looked too tight to bend. Like she was trying to close the distance without taking a step. Like she wanted to reach us with her face alone. To press that wrong smile against us. To make us understand something we weren't meant to understand. She stared at us with that same backward smile, mouth bent into a shape sorrow should never take. And those warm, impossibly kind eyes. Eyes that promised comfort. Eyes that offered love. That contradiction. Grief twisted into joy. Love corrupted into something alien. Settled in her face like it had always belonged there. Like it was her natural expression. Like she didn't understand why it should be any other way. Her eyes were on us now. Not the doubles. Us. I could feel the weight of her attention pressing against my chest. It was physical. It was real. It was suffocating. Eli made a sound. A sharp, shaky breath and that collapsed into a sob. Quick. Uncontrolled. The sound of someone breaking. That was all it took. Her body didn't move. Her face didn't change. She just opened her mouth and screamed. It didn't sound human. It didn't sound like anything that should exist in nature. It started low, like the groaning of a ship under pressure, like metal being bent beyond its capacity. Then it rose into something sharp and metallic, like rusted metal being torn apart underwater. The pitch climbed beyond what a person should be able to produce, beyond what should be possible, into frequencies that hurt, that bypassed the ears entirely and resonated directly in your skull. We hit the ground instantly, hands to our ears. It didn't help. The sound wasn't just loud, it was inside us, in our bones, our teeth, our skulls, vibrating through every hollow space in our bodies. I could feel it in my chest cavity, in my sinuses, in the soft tissue behind my eyes. Sam was yelling something, but I couldn't hear it. All I could hear was her, that impossible, world-ending scream. And then, it stopped. No fade, no echo, no lingering resonance. Just gone. The silence that followed hit just as hard. My hearing felt muffled, like I'd been underwater, like someone had stuffed cotton in my ears. For a few seconds, I could only hear my own breathing, sharp and uneven. My heartbeat in my ears, too fast, too hard. When I looked up, she was gone. And the others, the ones who looked like us, they were gone too. Disappeared without a trace, like they'd never been there at all. Like we'd imagined them. Like the island had taken back whatever it had shown us. I want to go back, Eli said behind us. His voice cracked halfway through. We shouldn't have come here. We need to leave. None of us answered. We didn't have a plan for any of this. We didn't even know what this was. We didn't have a boat. We didn't have supplies. We didn't have any way off this island. I think we are home, Nathan muttered, but it came out wrong. Uncertain. No one agreed. No one even looked at him. Because whatever this place was, it only looked like home. It wore home's face. But underneath, it was something else entirely. And now it knew we were here. We had no boat. No choice. So we moved inland. There wasn't a conversation about it. No group decision. Just a quiet understanding that staying where we were felt worse than pushing deeper into the island. We didn't know what we were looking for, maybe shelter, maybe sense, maybe just distance from that beach and whatever had been waiting for us there. The forest swallowed us quickly. The path that had been there a few minutes ago disappeared behind a wall of brush and bark. We pushed through, branches scraping our arms, leaves catching in our hair. The deeper we walked, the stranger everything became. The trees were wrong, not in obvious ways. Nothing that would scream out to someone who'd just arrived, but we knew trees. We'd grown up climbing them, chopping them, counting the rings of ones that had fallen in storms. We knew what they should look like, how they should grow. And these felt like copies. Imitations. Like something had tried to recreate them from memory and missed the proportions by fractions. Too many knots clustered in the wrong places. Branches that twisted back toward the trunk instead of reaching for the sun. Bark that felt like damp cloth when your hand brushed past it. Soft and yielding when it should have been rough and solid. The ground was soft, but not with moss or leaves. It felt loose, like something had recently shifted underneath it. Like the earth itself was unsettled. The air smelled like iron and mildew, and something sweet rotting deeper in the woods. Like meat left in the sun. Like decay wrapped in flowers. Eventually we found a clearing no wider than a fishing boat. A fallen tree split it down the middle, half uprooted, with thick green moss crawling along its trunk like veins. Jonah sat down on it heavily, hands on his knees, his face pale. Sam paced. Eli stood with his back to a tree, eyes scanning the brush like he expected something to emerge at any moment. Nathan just stared at nothing. His expression blank and distant. What the hell was that? Jonah finally asked. His voice sounded hollow. Exhausted. No one had an answer. What could we say? We'd seen something impossible. Something that shouldn't exist. And now we were stuck here with it. Sam was pacing again, running a hand through his hair over and over, a nervous tic he'd had since childhood. We need to find a way off this island. We need to. That's when we heard it. A click. Soft. Mechanical. Out of place. Not a branch snapping or the wind shifting, but the distinct sound of a latch lifting. A door, opening somewhere ahead of us in the woods. The sound was unmistakable. Deliberate. Like someone had been waiting for us to arrive at just this moment and had decided to invite us in. None of us said to move toward it. But we did. No one suggested turning back. No one asked if we were sure. Maybe because saying it out loud would make it real. Would force us to confront what we were doing. Or maybe because that sound, the quiet, metallic certainty of it, felt like a thread pulled taut. And we couldn't stop ourselves from following where it led. Like it had hooked into something deep in our chests and was reeling using. As we moved, the forest didn't grow thicker. It grew darker. The light filtering through the trees lost its sharpness. Not just shade. Like the sunlight itself had started to dim before it reached the branches. Like the forest was absorbing it, drinking it in. The air pressed in again. Not sharp, like on the beach. Heavier. Like something watching had started to breathe. Like the island itself was aware of us now. Like it had been sleeping and we'd woken it up. Eventually, the trees broke into another clearing. The grass here was shorter, yellowed and dry, crunching underfoot. And in the middle of it stood a house. None of us spoke at first. It wasn't broken down or ruined, just old. weathered boards, sun-faded paint that might have been white once. A small porch sloped slightly to one side, and the roof looked like it had sagged a little in the middle, like something heavy had once sat on it, or like it was slowly collapsing inward under its own weight. It looked like the kind of house someone might still live in, the kind you'd pass on the road and think nothing of. Ordinary, unremarkable. That's what made it terrifying. We approached slowly, cautious, not curious. Something about it made our steps slow down without us talking about it. I kept scanning the windows, half expecting someone to be standing just behind them, watching, waiting for us to get close enough. Nathan stopped before the others did. He tilted his head slightly, then pointed to the corner of the porch. "My dad made a post like that," he said quietly. His voice was strange. "Thin, what do you mean?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. He walked a few steps closer, squinting at the frame around the door, then to the woodwork under the windows. His fingers traced the air, following lines he recognized. "It's like our house," he said. "It's not the same, but it's close." He stepped up onto the porch. The boards creaked under his weight, a sound that seemed too loud in the stillness. We followed, hesitant. None of us wanted to be near the place, but no one wanted to let Nathan go alone either. We'd already lost sight of him once. The door was already cracked open, just a few inches, wide enough to see darkness beyond. Nathan hesitated anyway, his hand hovering near the wood, like something might still reach out and shut it, or reach out and pull him in. Nothing did, so he pushed it open the rest of the way. The smell hit first, just stale air and old wood and something else underneath. Copper maybe, like coins left in the rain. The kind of smell that settles in places where people have lived and died and been forgotten. It looked small from the outside, but the inside felt deeper, bigger than it should have been, like the walls had stretched just enough to be wrong, like the house existed in a space slightly larger than it occupied. Inside, the light was dim and orange-tinted, like it was filtering through the wrong kind of glass. The hallway was narrow, a coat rack on one side with no coats, faint scuff marks on the floor, a chair in the corner that looked familiar, though I couldn't say why. Everything felt like it had been arranged by someone who'd only heard about houses but never lived in one. Nathan stepped in first. We followed, slow, our footsteps too loud on the old floorboards. Nathan was quiet. He was looking at the photographs on the wall. They were of his family, his parents, his sister, him, but everything was reversed. His dad's watch was on the wrong wrist. His sister's birthmark, a small dark spot near her left ear, had switched to her right side. The smiles looked normal at first, until you stared too long. Too symmetrical, too wide, like mouths stretched just a little further than they should go. Eyes that didn't quite crinkle in the right places. To the right, a doorway led into what looked like a living room, mirrored, on our island. Nathan's living room was to the left when you walked in. Here, it was flipped. Not just the layout. Everything. The furniture placement. The pictures on the walls. Even the wear patterns on the rug were reversed. The furniture was the same kind. Not identical, but close. Same colors. Same fabric. Same wear patterns in mirrored positions. A clock on the wall ticked just a half beat slower than it should have. You wouldn't notice unless you were really listening. Unless you'd heard that clock 1,000 times before. The painting above the mantel showed a landscape we all recognized, the view from the northern cliffs, except the river ran the wrong direction. The mountains were on the opposite side. "I want to go," Eli said behind me. His voice was barely there, a whisper that almost got lost in the stillness. None of us answered. We just kept looking, scanning, trying to understand what we were seeing, what it meant. The room held us. Not physically, but in that way a nightmare does, where the air feels thick and stepping backward might wake something up, where movement itself feels dangerous. We weren't frozen, just slow, careful, like we were walking through a house made of glass. Jonah was eyeing the bookshelf, reading titles reversed in a mirror. Eli hovered near the fireplace, staring at ashes that looked too fresh. I stood by the wall, watching the second hand on the clock stutter with each tick, fighting against time itself. Sam moved toward the painting above the mantel, staring at it like he expected it to move, to change, to reveal something. No one talked. We were all too deep in it, scanning corners, studying the little wrong details, trying to figure out what this place was, why it existed, what it wanted from us. Then Sam turned, brow furrowed, confusion shifting to concern. "Where's Nathan?" Every head snapped around. He wasn't there. He hadn't made a sound. No footsteps. No door creak. No call. He'd vanished like air. Like he'd been erased from the room while we weren't looking. We searched the house fast, calling his name, our voices too loud and too frantic in the empty spaces. Moving from room to room in a rush that didn't feel loud, just clumsy. Like our panic didn't want to make noise but couldn't help it. There weren't many places he could have gone. The hallway led to a small kitchen with empty cupboards and a table set for dinner that no one would eat. A stairwell with steps that creaked differently under each foot. And a narrow back room with a locked door that wouldn't open no matter how hard we tried. Jonah tried the handle and found it wouldn't budge. He put his shoulder into it. Nothing. No light under the crack. No sound from inside. Just solid wood and silence. Sam ran up the stairs 2 at a time, Eli and I close behind. They creaked under us like normal stairs. Nothing theatrical, nothing dramatic. But every groan from the wood felt too sharp. Too deliberate. Like the house was responding. Like it was talking. There were 2 bedrooms upstairs. One was empty, bare except for a bed frame and a window nailed shut from the inside. Boards across the glass. The second had a dresser, a mirror with a cracked corner that split your reflection into pieces, and more photographs. A different version of Nathan's family. This time, the faces were missing from some of the frames. Blurred out or too dark to see. Like they'd been deliberately obscured. Or like they'd never existed at all. But no Nathan. We checked under the bed. In the closet. Behind doors. Under tables. In every corner and crevice where a person might hide or be hidden. Nothing. When we reached the bottom of the stairs, Jonah wasn't there. We found him just outside, a few steps off the porch, arms crossed, staring at the house like it had personally offended him. "I checked around the house too," he said, not looking at us. His jaw was tight. "He's not here." We stood there, all 4 of us, facing the house like it might give something back. Like it might spit Nathan out if we just waited long enough. The open door gaped in front of us, cold air leaking out like breath. Like the house was exhaling. Sam looked at me, his face pale. "Do we go back in?" No one replied. What would be the point? We'd searched everywhere. He was just gone. Then, footsteps. From inside. Slow. Measured. Deliberate. Getting closer. The porch creaked. Nathan stepped into the doorway. He just stood there, like he'd never left. Like the last 10 minutes hadn't happened. His face was blank. Expressionless. His shirt was damp, darker than it had been before. Like he'd been somewhere wet. Somewhere cold. None of us spoke. No one moved. He stepped forward slowly, one hand brushing the frame like it grounded him. Like he needed to touch it to make sure it was real. He looked rested. Calm. Too calm. His clothes were the same, but the fit seemed off, like they belonged to a version of him just slightly smaller, or built differently. The seams were in the wrong places. He blinked, squinted at us, then frowned, puzzled, like he couldn't understand why we were making such strange faces. "What?" he said. "Why are you all staring at me?" His voice was right. The same pitch. The same cadence. But something underneath was different. Like someone doing a perfect impression without understanding what they were imitating. Eli was the first to speak. "Where the hell did you go?" Nathan tilted his head. The angle was wrong. Too far. "What do you mean?" "I was upstairs." "We checked upstairs," I said carefully. "Every room. You weren't there." Nathan looked at each of us, one by one. His face was blank at first, but then something shifted, a flicker of a smile that came and went too fast. Not warm, not reassuring, just performed. Like he was remembering what a smile was supposed to look like and reproducing it. "I saw you," he said. "Through the railing. You were in the hall. You just walked off." That didn't make sense. We'd torn through every room. Shouted his name. He wasn't there. No one had seen him. And there was no way he could have missed the noise we made. We'd been loud. Panicked. Desperate. I was watching his hands. Nathan always rubbed his thumb against his knuckle when he was nervous. A little tick. Unconscious. Something he'd done since we were kids. This Nathan's hands were still. Relaxed. perfectly composed. At his sides like a soldier at attention. He stepped down from the porch. None of us moved. "Are we going?" he asked. Same voice. Same face. But the rhythm was off by a beat. Too calm. Too smooth. Too certain. Like he knew exactly what to say and when to say it. No one answered. We just stared, waiting for something to twitch wrong, waiting for the mask to slip. I opened my mouth to say something, but I couldn't make the words form. Not the right ones, anyway. What do you say? How do you accuse someone of not being themselves when they look exactly right? We just started moving, brisk, determined, not quite running but no longer willing to stop. The sky was dimming fast, the woods deepening in color, and everything around us seemed to press in with a quiet that felt more like watching than stillness. Like the trees had eyes. Like the ground was listening. Jonah walked up front. Sam stayed beside me. Eli and Nathan trailed behind us, a little slower, not too far back at first. We were heading back toward the beach. Back toward where we'd landed. Maybe there'd be a boat. Maybe someone from home had come looking. Maybe we could swim and take our chances with the sharks. We were almost to the beach when it hit us. A voice cracked open behind us, rasping, high-pitched, like a throat trying to speak for the first time and tearing itself apart in the process. There was the shape of a word, but the sound didn't know how to hold it. Like vocal cords that had forgotten their purpose. It said something that might have been stop, or stay, or come. Or maybe it said nothing at all. Maybe it was just sound shaped like language. We froze. Every one of us. None of us looked back. We didn't need to. We knew what was there. Run, Jonah said firmly. Just that one word. That was it. So we ran. Branches whipped our arms, leaving welts. Roots caught our feet, sending us stumbling. The path bent the wrong way more than once, and every tree looked like one we'd already passed. Like the forest was looping. Like we were running in circles. But we kept moving, pushing forward through the tightening forest, lungs burning, legs screaming, until the trees finally broke open again and we saw it. The dock, warped and crooked, half sunken at the far end. But there, real. A boat was tied to it. Not the one we'd taken, but something older, narrower, wood so dark it looked almost black. Still afloat. We stopped at the edge of the tree line and turned. I checked to make sure everyone was with us. I counted. 1, 2, 3. Eli was not there. I watched the clearing behind us, expecting to see him jogging up, cursing, or out of breath. But the path stayed empty. Silent. We waited. A few more seconds passed. Seconds that felt like hours. Then we heard it. A scream, ragged and sharp, echoing through the trees like it didn't belong to a voice, but to something breaking. Not words. Just pain. Pure, animal pain. Jonah moved first. He stepped away from the boats, 1 foot toward the woods, trying to be brave, trying to do the right thing, trying to go back for Eli. And that's when she appeared. She walked slowly out from the bend of the path, circling into view like a predator that had already made its kill. Cradled in her arms was Eli. He was still screaming. His body writhed, legs kicking, hands clawing at her shoulders. She didn't struggle. She didn't even seem to notice. Her arms were wrapped tightly around him, pulling him against her chest like a mother calming a child in the middle of a tantrum. Like she was comforting him, soothing him. Her face was fixed on us. Not Eli. Not the forest. Just us. Her eyes never left ours, like she wanted us to see everything. Like this was a performance. A demonstration. And we did. That same downward smile carved her mouth into a deep, strained curve. It looked like the expression had been sculpted into her face with wire, pulled tight and wrong. But her eyes told a different story, soft, glassy, full of warmth and something that looked horribly like love. Like she was watching something beautiful unfold. Like Eli's agony was a gift she was giving us. As she held Eli tighter, her lips quivered slightly, as if the shape was difficult to maintain. As if smiling, really smiling the way she wanted to, was a struggle. Her cheeks twitched, like they couldn't decide whether to frown or laugh. She was trying to be gentle. She wanted us to know that. She needed us to understand that she wasn't being cruel, that this was kindness. Eli was screaming, but it wasn't just fear. It was pain. Real pain. Physical pain. The kind that stopped sounding human. His arms pushed against her shoulders, clawing, slapping, nothing that made a difference. His legs kicked out violently, his whole body thrashing like an animal in a snare. The heels of his boots barely scraped against the dirt as he was being held up, suspended in her arms like he weighed nothing. And still, she looked at us. Like we were the ones she was holding. Like we were the ones she wanted to comfort. Sam made a sound, half a sob, half a curse, and stepped forward. His hands were shaking. Jonah grabbed his arm hard enough to bruise. "We can't," he whispered, his voice cracking on the words. "We can't." But we all took a step anyway. I did. I felt my foot move before I meant it to. Like something in me couldn't stand still and watch. Like my body refused to accept what my mind already knew, that we couldn't save him, that it was already too late. Then Eli screamed again, louder this time, high and desperate, raw at the edges. The kind of sound that burns your throat even when you're not the one making it. The kind of sound that stays with you forever. He kept kicking, kept trying, kept fighting even though fighting was pointless. She didn't flinch, didn't tighten her grip suddenly. It wasn't violence. It was pressure. Steady, controlled, methodical, like she was soothing him into silence, one bone at a time. His screams of agony unraveled into a choking, broken gasp, like even his voice was giving out, like his body was shutting down from the inside. Then we heard it, a single crack, subtle, quiet, like a thick branch snapping underfoot. But we all knew what it was. We all understood. Eli jerked once in her arms, then stopped moving. His head lolled against her shoulder. His arms dangled at his sides, empty of fight, empty of life. His eyes were still open, staring at nothing, at everything. She didn't stop smiling. She held him there, still watching us. Her eyes locked onto ours like she wanted to see what we'd do next, like she was waiting for us to understand. Her fingers brushed his back in slow, meaningless circles, like she was soothing him to sleep, like he was just resting, like she couldn't comprehend what she'd done or didn't care. Jonah stepped backward first, then Sam. I followed. I didn't even think. I just moved. My body made the decision before my mind caught up. The boat scraped against the dock as we pulled it into the water, the sound harsh and wrong in the terrible silence. Nathan hadn't spoken. I looked at him once, just once, and wished I hadn't. He wasn't crying, wasn't breathing hard, wasn't showing any sign of shock or horror. He was standing completely still, watching her, and there was something small and soft at the corner of his mouth. An attempted smile, just enough to be seen, just enough to be wrong, just enough to confirm what we'd all been afraid to think. We climbed into the boat, pushed off. No one looked back except me. She was still standing at the edge of the trees, Eli's body limp against her chest, one arm wrapped around him like he was hers, like she was his mother and had every right to hold him, and the other lifted slowly. She waved, a small, gentle wave, the kind you'd give to a friend departing, the kind that says, "See you soon." We didn't speak on the water. None of us touched the oars at first. The tide pulled us gently, like the sea itself was too tired to fight, like it knew we'd been through enough. The sun had almost slipped beneath the horizon, casting everything in that strange, copper light that makes the world feel unreal, like you're seeing it through memory instead of your own eyes. Like nothing is quite solid anymore. Jonah finally took one oar, Sam the other. I sat in the middle, arms locked around my knees, staring at the ripple patterns trailing behind us. I don't remember when we lost sight of the mirrored island. I just remember the moment the real one came into view. The same island we left. Same houses. Same hills. Same docks. Same everything. But we didn't come back whole. One of us was dead, and one of us came back wrong. There was a crowd at the shoreline. People from the village. Parents. A few older brothers. A grandmother with her arms folded tight across her chest. They weren't shouting or pacing or scanning the horizon frantically. They just stood there, like they'd been waiting. Like they'd known we'd return. Like they'd always known. The boat scraped against the sand. Hands reached out. My father, Sam's mother, Jonah's uncle. They helped us out without a word, their eyes flicking from face to face, counting silently, looking for who was missing. When they didn't find Eli, no one said it out loud. They just knew. Like they'd always known this might happen. Like this had happened before. His mother began to cry, quiet at first, then sharp and shuddering, a sound that tore through the evening air. His father stood behind her, unmoving, staring past us at the horizon like he was still hoping to see his son come into view. Like hope was the only thing he had left. One of the older villagers, maybe the priest, maybe just someone who'd done this before, put a hand on her back and gently led her away. She didn't resist. She just let herself be led, walking like someone made of paper. Like one wrong move would tear her apart. Someone reached for Nathan and pulled him ashore, calm and deliberate. Like they knew he needed help. Like they could see something we weren't sure we were seeing. His mother rushed forward next, throwing her arms around him, clutching him so hard it looked painful. She was crying too, but it was different. Relief mixed with something else. Her hands twisted in the back of his shirt, gripping fabric like she was afraid he might disappear if she let go. But her face stayed tense, like she was trying to convince herself this was really him. Like she already knew, deep down, that something was wrong. Like she already knew she'd have to let go again. Nathan didn't hug her at first. He stood stiff for a second, arms at his sides, like he'd forgotten what a hug was. Then slowly, mechanically, he wrapped his arms around her. The movement was correct but wrong. Like someone following instructions. Like mimicry. When she pulled back to look at him, something shifted in her face. Her hands stayed on his shoulders, but her fingers had gone stiff. Her eyes scanned him like she didn't recognize what she was holding. Like she was looking at a stranger wearing her son's face. Nathan smiled. "You're holding me like I died." His voice was almost playful. Almost. But the tone was off. The timing was wrong. He let out a small laugh. Quiet. Thin. Like he wasn't sure if the joke had landed. It was too practiced. It started too fast and ended too late, hanging in the air like it didn't know when to stop. Like he'd heard laughter before, but never understood what caused it. His smile stayed in place, but it didn't settle right. The corners of his mouth began to pull down instead of up. At first it looked like a twitch, a nervous tick. Then it kept going, bending further, stretching the muscles in his face into that same strained expression we'd seen on her. A smile that was trying to mimic joy, but failing at the geometry of it. The same backward smile that had haunted us on that other shore. His eyes didn't match it. They looked heavy, glassy, and full of something that didn't belong in a smile. Regret, maybe, or grief. Something ancient and sad. He wasn't afraid, just resigned. Like something inside him understood what came next and didn't try to fight it. Like he knew this was how it had to be. His mother let go of his arms. She took a step back, one hand covering her mouth. The other reached out like she wanted to touch him again, but couldn't make herself do it. Behind her, the others had already started to move. They didn't raise their voices. They didn't argue. They didn't debate. It was as if the whole village had already made peace with what needed to happen. Like they'd done this before. Like this was part of a ritual older than any of us. A few men stepped forward. Jonah's uncle, Sam's father, a neighbor I didn't know by name. Their faces were set, determined, sad but certain. Nathan didn't resist. He didn't ask why. He didn't plead or cry or run. He just stood there, shoulders low, his eyes still on his mother. There was something in that look, an apology maybe, or an acknowledgement, or just goodbye. One hand reached for his sleeve, another for his collar. They escorted him to the sea like they'd done it before. Like this was procedure. Protocol. No ceremony. No shouting. No final words. Just the sound of the tide and the low murmur of footsteps on wet sand. Just the quiet acceptance of what had to be done. They held him under until the waves stopped moving around them. Until the water went still. And then they let him go. His body floated for a moment before the current took it. Pulled it out to sea. Back toward that other island. Back to where it belonged. I still wonder if the real Nathan died in that house. Or if we left him there, alive, watching us walk away. Trapped in that mirrored place with her. With that thing that wore kindness like a mask. Sometimes I think what came back with us wasn't pretending. I think it believed it was him. I think it thought it was Nathan and couldn't understand why we were afraid. Why we pulled away. Why we drowned it in the sea it had crossed to reach us. We begged our parents to send someone back. A boat. A search party. Anything. We told them about the house. About the woman. About what we saw. But they just looked through us, like we hadn't spoken, like we hadn't seen what we saw, like our words were just sounds without meaning. By the next day, no one even said his name. Eli's funeral was held 3 days later. An empty casket. His mother sobbed through the whole thing. His father stood like a statue, eyes empty. No one mentioned Nathan at all, like he'd never existed, like we'd imagined him. I left the island when I turned 18. Took the trade boat despite every unspoken rule saying I shouldn't. Despite the looks from everyone who stayed. I never went back. Jonah and Sam are still there, as far as I know. Still fishing. Still living the same lives. Still seeing that other island every day and pretending it isn't there. Still following the rule. Never talk about the island across the water. But I broke that rule the moment I left. And I'll keep breaking it. Because Eli deserves to be remembered. Because Nathan, the real Nathan, deserves to have his story told. And because that woman in the pale dress is still there, waiting on that shore. Still smiling that wrong smile. Still holding out her arms for the next child who's foolish enough to cross the water. Still waiting to show them what kindness looks like when it forgets how to be human.